This happened a few months ago. I'm Jason, 34, and I work as a night shift nurse at a small hospital on the outskirts of town. I've had my fair share of quiet nights, but that week felt different. It started after I checked on a patient one late night. The lights flickered like they were alive. I turned a corner and saw a wheelchair rolling down the hall. It rolled slowly and steadily, like it had a mind of its own. I felt a chill. Maybe it was just my nerves acting up, so I pushed the feeling aside. I had a job to do. Later that week, I was on my break. I heard whispers coming from room 203. I couldn't make out the words, but it felt like names were being spoken. I went to check, but the room was empty. That didn't sit right with me. The patient's file wasn't in sight. I mentioned it to my colleagues. They exchanged looks before one said, "That patient passed away years ago. It was strange." I couldn't shake the feeling that the wheelchair and the whispers were connected. I was still trying to reason it out in my head. Did I really believe in that kind of stuff? Maybe I was just overtired. But something was pulling at me, and I couldn't ignore it. The next shift, I went to grab supplies from the closet. I saw a shadow dart across the hallway. I blinked, but it was gone. I felt sweat on my palms and a strange heaviness in the air. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Back at my station, I thought about the whispers. That urge to check room 203 tugged at me, but I resisted. What if there was something there? I laughed to myself, convincing myself it was just fatigue. But then I felt it again, the sensation of being watched. Finally, I checked my watch, hoping it would ease my anxiety. I just needed a break. Right when I thought things were calming down, I heard it, a name whispered, soft but urgent, just outside my door. I froze, my heart racing, my feet felt glued to the ground. Then I saw a figure at the edge of my vision. When I turned to look directly, it had disappeared. I felt a tightness in my throat. I couldn't decide if I was losing my grip on reality or if something was truly wrong. I didn't want to believe it was anything supernatural. I walked away from the door, needing a moment to breathe. Each step I took felt heavier. I could feel that strange pull again, almost like I was being drawn back. But deep down, I knew facing whatever was haunting the halls was inevitable. The shadows followed me as I walked away. I didn't know how long I could ignore them. Would I see that wheelchair again? Would I hear those whispers? I felt like I was on the edge of something I didn't understand, and the thought of going back to room 203 haunted me every night after that. I didn't want to go back to room 203, but that night something felt different. I arrived at work and the atmosphere hit me like a cold wave. I noticed the lights flickering again, but this time it wasn't just a flicker. It felt more chaotic, like a strobe effect. I swallowed hard. "Hey, Jason," a colleague greeted me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. Just a rough night. As I settled in, the whispers echoed in my head. I couldn't shake them off. During my shift, I noticed a few old photographs hanging in the staff break room. They depicted patients and staff from years past, including room 203. I examined them closely, searching for clues. One patient's face stood out to me. She looked familiar. I couldn't remember where I'd seen her before. Around midnight, I found myself at the nurse's station. The air was heavier than usual, and I struggled to concentrate. Then I heard a loud crash from the supply closet. I jumped up, heart racing, and rushed to see what happened. There, on the floor, was a stack of boxes that had toppled over. But as I knelt to inspect, something caught my eye. A small silver key lay among the scattered supplies. I picked it up, feeling an odd connection. It felt cold against my palm. What could it unlock? I couldn't help but think of room 203. I hesitated, my heart pounding. Did I really want to go down that road? I turned back toward my station, but the strange pull was stronger this time. It was almost irresistible. It felt like I was being called. "Come on, Jason," I muttered to myself. "It's just your imagination." But as I placed the key in my pocket, I knew I would have to check room 203. With a deep breath, I walked down the quiet, dimly lit hallway. The whispers seemed to return, growing louder each step I took. When I reached the door, the air turned icy. I grabbed the handle, limiting my focus on the key. Just as I inserted it and twisted, the lights began to flicker violently again. I felt a surge of fear. What if I unlocked something I couldn't handle? The door creaked open, revealing an empty room. My heart sank. Then I heard it again. A name called out softly, but this time it was clear. Lily. I stumbled back, almost dropping the key. Who was Lily? I whispered into the empty room. Is someone there? Nothing. Just as I turned to leave, something caught my eye on the floor. A small, tightly folded piece of paper sat partially hidden beneath an old bed. My gut told me to walk away, but my curiosity got the better of me. I knelt down, picked it up, and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but legible. The words were chilling. "Help me find my way home." In that moment, I realized there was more to the whispers, the shadows, and the wheelchair than I'd ever imagined. It felt like I had crossed a line I couldn't return from. My instincts screamed that I was closer to the truth, but at what price? Then I heard them again, voices whispering my name from behind me. I turned around, but the room stood empty. My heart raced, and just before I bolted, the door slammed shut. I was frozen for a moment, staring at the closed door. The air thickened around me, and every instinct screamed for me to run. But something kept me rooted in place, as if the room itself had wrapped around me like a cold, clammy blanket. "Jason," I murmured, trying to calm my racing heart. I had to get out. But then I heard it again, a faint whisper, the syllables barely audible. "Help me, Lily." That name echoed in my mind. Who was she? Why did this place feel like it held her essence, mixed with the shadows? I glanced back at the folded note in my hand. It felt alive, filled with a desperate energy. "I can't help you," I whispered to the empty space, willing myself to sound brave. "What do you want from me?" The response came not in words, but as a sudden chill that brushed past me. Instinctively, I took a step back and slammed into the edge of the bed. The metal frame creaked ominously. "Jason!" A voice boomed from the hallway, shattering the brief silence. It was my supervisor, Sarah. "What are you doing in there?" I rushed to yank the door open, but it wouldn't budge. It was as though something on the other side had blocked it. Panic clawed at my chest. "It's stuck!" I shouted, pulling harder. The door finally swung open with a loud creak, and I stumbled out, nearly falling into Sarah. I caught myself just in time. "Are you okay? You look pale. What happened?" she worried, her voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. I wanted to tell her everything, the whispers, the key, the note, but the words felt tangled in my throat. I felt absurd. How could I explain that I had been drawn in by something I couldn't even understand? Instead, I just shook my head, taking a breath to steady myself. "Just an old memory. Hospital stuff." Her brow furrowed slightly, but she seemed to buy it. "You should take a break. I'll cover the nurse's station for a bit." "Thanks, but I'll be all right. I just need to clear my head," I replied, forcing a smile. I wasn't done with room 203. As Sarah walked away, I glanced back at the door, my heart racing at the thought of going back inside. I weighed my options. I could easily find a way to avoid it, let the haunting feelings fester. But the note burned in my pocket. Help me find my way home. The urgency pulled me back. I walked back to the nurse's station, my pulse racing with each step. At the counter, I noticed a map of the hospital hanging on the wall. One part of the map was marked with a faded X. My stomach dropped. Room 203 wasn't the only mystery in the building, and something told me it was all connected. Hesitating only a moment, I approached the map. That's when I saw it. A name scribbled near the X. Lily. A surge of adrenaline hit me. I realized I had to follow this thread, but dread loomed like a storm cloud. What if I uncovered something I couldn't handle? Before I could think twice, I turned and made my way back to room 203, determined to face whatever awaited me inside. I held the note tightly in my hand, the paper crumpling under my grip, a token of the path I was about to tread. The uncertainty gnawed at my gut, but I was in too deep now. With every step toward the door, I felt that familiar chill. This time, I had to be ready. As I pushed open the door, the lights flickered, and the whispers crescendoed. Something was waiting for me, and it wasn't going to let me leave until I understood the truth. I stepped back into room 203, the door creaking ominously as it swung shut behind me. The atmosphere was different now. The whispers had quieted to an expectant hum, like a crowd waiting for the main event. I felt the weight of unseen eyes fixed on me, and the chill clung to my skin. "Lily?" I called out, my voice trembling in the stillness. There was no answer, just the echo of my name bouncing off the sterile walls. I stepped further into the room, scanning every corner, half expecting to see something, someone. The faint desaturation of colors painted the walls a dull gray, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the room was holding its breath. I focused on the note again. "Help me find my way home." The words sank deeper into my mind. What did that mean? I moved toward the window, the heavy curtains drawn tight against the evening light. I pulled them apart, and the sunlight flooded in, illuminating dust particles that danced like tiny spirits. Outside, the hospital grounds stretched endlessly, the world oblivious to what transpired here. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye on the floor, a glint of metal. I crouched down and gingerly picked up a small key, its surface cool and smooth against my palm. There was no label, no indication of what it might unlock. My heart raced. Was this part of the puzzle? Suddenly, the air shifted. A rustling sound came from the corner of the room, and I flipped around, instinctively clutching the key. My breath hitching in my throat, I braced myself. "Help me." That voice, desperate and haunting, whispered through the air again. It was coming from the small closet tucked away in the corner of the room. My pulse quickened. I knew I should be running. I knew I should be terrified. But a relentless curiosity surged within me. The need to find out who Lily was, what she wanted, consumed me. Slowly, I approached the closet. With shaking hands, I opened the door. The hinges creaked in protest, revealing a space small and dark, filled with old linens and equipment layered in dust. But in the back, I saw a shadow move. "Who's there?" I croaked, fighting the instinct to slam the door shut. The shadow shifted again, and I felt a rush of cold air engulf me. Then everything went still. The only sound was the rapid thumping of my heart. "Help me, find my way home," the voice begged again, more urgent this time. I leaned closer, peering into the dimness, straining to see. That's when my gaze fell upon a scrap of paper lying on the ground. I reached for it, fingers trembling, and as I unfolded the note, a chill swept over me. It was a hastily written message. "Lily, 203, don't forget." A memory flashed in my mind, something from my training, another incident from years ago. I turned my head back toward the darkness of the closet, and my breath caught.
There, at the far end, was a small figure, barely outlined in the shadows. "Lily?" I whispered, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The figure stepped forward, and in an instant the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. Then, just as suddenly, the lights burst back to life, and she was gone. The closet was empty, the air heavy with silence. I stumbled back, clutching the paper, and realized I had uncovered something darker than I anticipated. I needed to know more about Lily, but I also knew I was no longer alone in my pursuit of the truth. Who was she? The question echoed in my mind as I backed away, snapping the note shut. I took one last glance at the closet. A sense of urgency knotted in my stomach. Whatever was happening was only just beginning. I stood frozen, the note crumpled tightly in my fist. The air felt charged, as if the room itself buzzed with energy. I forced myself to breathe, but the chill lingered, wrapping around me like a thick fog. My mind raced. There was something here, something I had to uncover. I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was still watching me. I could still hear her voice echoing in the corners of my mind. It was time to dig deeper. Gritting my teeth, I turned away from the closet and reached for the key again. The cool metal felt strangely reassuring. I glanced around the room, trying to recall the layout of the ward. There were other rooms, other doors. What could they hide? My heart raced at the thought of unlocking secrets. I stepped toward the door, determined to explore. The hallway beyond room 203 was dimly lit. My footsteps echoed softly as I moved, but I felt the sensation of being drawn toward another door at the end of the corridor. It was marked 201, slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me closer. "Lily?" I whispered again, the name tasting foreign on my lips. The air felt thick as I pushed the door open. The room inside was similar to 203, cold, empty, hints of abandonment hanging in the air. The bed was unmade, a sterile scent mixing oddly with the muted aroma of old wood. As I stepped inside, a shiver crawled down my spine. A swift movement caught my eye. I glanced toward the corner of the room and froze. A figure stood there, cloaked in shadow. "Who's there?" I demanded, voice tense. Panic flickered in my chest, but the figure didn't move, just watched, unblinking. The resemblance to Lily was uncanny, but something felt off. She looked just like the shadow from the closet. "Help me." The voice was faint, grains of urgency woven into the fabric of the sound. I couldn't breathe. My legs threatened to give way. "Lily?" I stepped forward, but the figure blurred, dissolving into the air like mist. I fought against the rising panic and focused instead on the walls of the room. Something caught my eye, an envelope clipped to the edge of the bedside table. I rushed over, heart pounding hard against my chest. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the envelope, revealing a collection of photographs, faded images of a girl in hospital gowns, smiling, and another woman. I felt a strange pull as I flipped through them, emotions whirling within me. Then I found it, a photo of the girl holding a small teddy bear. Her eyes were bright, but something in her expression struck me as familiar. I glanced back at the shadow I had seen moments prior. It looked just like her. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from down the hallway. I jumped, my heart racing again. What was that? I muttered to myself, adrenaline surging. I couldn't dismiss the sound, my instinct screaming at me to leave, but I had to know. With newfound determination, I gripped the key tightly and headed toward the source of the noise. I had come this far. There was no turning back now. Whatever was happening here was only going to get more intense, and I needed answers. Each step felt like an eternity, but I soon found myself standing before the door to room 201. The air outside it felt heavier, like a storm was brewing. Gathering my courage, I opened the door. Inside, darkness loomed, but I could see a glimpse of movement. Was it Lily? Was she waiting for me? The room was engulfed in shadows, but I could make out the faint outline of a figure in the corner. My heart raced as I stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind me. "Lily?" I called softly, uncertainty gnawing at my resolve. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shifting darkness. The air was suffocating, thick with dread. All my senses screamed for me to turn back, but an inexplicable pull kept my feet rooted to the spot. The figure shifted slightly, light catching the edges of what looked like matted hair and a hospital gown. I took a cautious step forward. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure paused, as if considering how to answer. "Help me," the voice echoed again, this time more insistent. There was something hauntingly familiar about it, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Please, find me." Before I could respond, the figure vanished, leaving only a lingering sensation of dread in the air. I stood alone, mouth dry, eyes wide. A rush of adrenaline pushed me forward, urging me to explore this dark room further. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed a small nightstand beside the empty bed. My curiosity drove me closer, and I fumbled to unlock the drawer. Inside, I found not much, just an old diary. The pages were yellowed and worn, but the name scrawled across the cover stopped me cold. Lily. I flipped open the diary, the brittle pages crackling under my fingers.
Scrawled in a childlike hand were dates and brief entries, mostly mundane moments. But then I noticed a shift in tone. "They're watching," one entry read. "Can't let them take me." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read on. The last few entries were frantic, filled with drawings of dark figures and cries for help. "I need to leave. They're coming." I slammed the diary shut, my mind racing. Who was Lily? What had happened to her? The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor outside. My heart dropped. Someone, or something, was approaching. Panic surged through me, and I shoved the diary into my pocket. I had to hide. I ducked behind the bed, pressing myself against the wall, the fabric of the hospital sheets cool against my skin. My breath quickened as the door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the hallway light. It was hard to see their features, but they moved with an undeniable purpose. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. Just then, the figure paused. Lily? A thrill ran through me. It wasn't her. Whoever it was, they didn't sound like the girl in the photos. But hope surged. Maybe they were here to help. But then they turned and looked straight at me, their eyes glinting with unsettling familiarity. Everything in me screamed to turn and run. Before I could think, I noticed something glinting in their hand, a familiar key. My heart sank. No. That's when everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was still in the same room, but it was now dimmer, almost like twilight. The oppressive silence pressed down on me. My heart was racing, and I felt disoriented, as if I'd just woken from a deep sleep. I tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea hit me. The last thing I remembered was that figure with the key. I glanced around, half expecting them to still be there. Instead, the room was empty. I was alone again. Pushing myself off the floor, I swayed for a moment before steadying myself. The nightstand stood close, and I stumbled toward it, still gripping the edges to keep myself upright. I needed to think clearly. I pulled the diary from my pocket and flipped through the pages, suffering through the heavy silence. "Find me," I muttered under my breath. What does that even mean? The entries were cryptic, but there had to be a clue hidden among them. I searched again, my fingers trembling over the paper. That's when I saw it, a faded sketch, barely visible, but unmistakably marking a layout of the hospital. A surge of electricity ran through me. The drawing depicted the floor plan, but it didn't match how I remembered the building. I traced the paths with my finger, my mind racing. If I followed this, maybe I could find Lily, or whatever had become of her. Before I could process my next move, I heard it. The footsteps again. They were louder this time, more deliberate. My heart dropped as I shoved the diary back into my pocket.
There was no escape from the room to the left, but there was a small door to the right, partially ajar. I pushed it open and squeezed through. I found myself in a narrow corridor lined with stark white walls. I moved quickly, the echoes of the footsteps still haunting me from the other end. As I rushed forward, I spotted a flickering light up ahead. I hesitated, fear creeping back in. What if it was the figure again? What if they knew I had the diary? Still, curiosity was like an itch I couldn't scratch. I had to know. The light flickered again, revealing a room stacked with old medical supplies. I stepped inside, my breath hitching at the sight. There was a table covered in surgical tools, and in the corner, another figure, this one small and frail, huddled against the wall. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice breaking as I approached cautiously. The figure looked up, eyes wide and filled with fear. "Help me," she echoed, but the voice was different this time, strained and trembling. Suddenly, the footsteps closed in. Panic surged through me. I needed to act. Without thinking, I grabbed a nearby lamp for protection. This didn't feel like a rescue. I could feel the eyes watching me again, the inescapable sense of dread painting the walls around us. "Stay back," I yelled, pointing the lamp toward the entrance. But the darkness shifted, and the figure blocking the doorway stepped into the light. My heart sank further as recognition hit me. This was the person from before, but this time I could see them clearly. The familiar key dangled from their hand, glinting ominously. "Where is she?" I demanded, feeling both dread and desperation mixing in my gut. Their lips curled into a smile, but it was far from reassuring. "She's where no one can find her," they replied. "Join us, and you'll see." The air thickened as I backed away. I could feel my pulse quicken again, a throbbing reminder that I was running out of time. Behind me, the girl whimpered, and the footsteps grew closer. "Stay away from her!" I shouted. Now I was trapped, 2 figures inching closer, and a choice to make. I tightened my grip on the lamp, its cold metal grounding me, as the figure in front of me took a step forward. "You don't understand," I shouted, desperation bubbling over. "I'm not afraid of you." "Are you sure?" they replied, their voice dripping with mockery. It was chilling, like they nearly enjoyed my fear. They took another step closer, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. The small room felt like it was closing in around me. I turned my head slightly to glance back at Lily. Her fragile form seemed even smaller now, huddled in the corner, as her wide eyes darted back and forth between us. "Lily, stay behind me," I demanded, my heart racing as I prepared to defend both of us. The figure with the key tilted their head, feigning concern. "Oh, but she's with me now. You should join us before it's too late." The whisper was almost hypnotic, drawing me in. My stomach churned, and I forced myself to shake off the unsettling feeling. The footsteps behind me echoed again. I had to make a decision, and fast. I could either fight or flee. But the thought of abandoning Lily was unbearable. "I won't let you take her!" I shouted. With that, I suddenly lunged forward, swinging the lamp high, wanting to create a distraction.
But just as I did, the figure in front of me darted sideways into the shadows with inhuman speed, dodging my swing effortlessly. A chilling laugh rippled through the room. "You'll have to be faster than that." They re-emerged from behind a stack of boxes, closer this time. I stumbled back, my back hitting the walls of the room. "Lily!" I screamed again, but the sound seemed muted, suffocated by the looming dread. I turned to see the girl still trembling in place, eyes fixed on the exchange with a mix of fear and confusion. "Just come with us," the figure urged once more, the tone gently persuasive. "You'll find what you're looking for." "No!" I snapped. I had to find a way out, but the only exit was now blocked. The figure with the key stared at me, eyes glinting in the dim light. "You don't have to fight. You can be part of something greater." I couldn't shake the feeling of traps closing in. My mind raced as I recalled the diary. There must be something that could help me. As I glanced around, I noticed something shiny on the table filled with medical tools. A scalpel glinted under the weak light, its blade promising both danger and potential escape. In a flash, I lunged for the scalpel. The figure lunged at me at the same time. We collided, and the world spun as I wrestled for control. I managed to grasp the scalpel tightly, my heart pounding in my ears. "Stay away!" I yelled, holding it out in front of me. The figure paused, eyes widening, fear now creeping in their expression. And that's when I heard it, loud and decisive, an alarm blaring throughout the corridor. My heart raced faster as I realized the hospital was awakening, the echoes of sirens growing closer. "Run!" I shouted to Lily, who seemed frozen. "We have to go now!" The alarm sounded like salvation, but I knew we still had no time. The figure's face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this." I grabbed Lily's arm and pulled her toward the side exit. She stumbled, but quickly picked up pace. We dashed into the corridor as the alarm screamed. Behind us, I heard the figure's furious shout. "That's just the beginning." The echoes of their voice followed us as I ran, uncertain if we were truly free or if something far worse awaited us back in the shadows. The alarms grew louder, and so did my fear. We needed to escape, but with every step, I felt the weight of something sinister closing in. The corridor stretched endlessly before us, each flickering light casting uneasy shadows that danced along the walls. I dragged Lily along, my heart pounding, adrenaline fueling my escape. The shrill alarms only heightened our fear as we raced forward, desperate for safety. "Where do we go?" Lily's voice trembled beside me, her small hand shaking in mine. "Just keep running," I urged, glancing back to see if the figure was following. Nothing yet, but I knew they wouldn't give up easily. My gut twisted with worry. Would they be able to track us by sound or scent? The reasonable part of my mind screamed that we were still in great danger. We rounded a corner, leading us into another hallway lined with deserted examination rooms. My body tensed at the thought of turning around. I could feel the weight of the figure's chilling gaze, lingering just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. "Stay close," I instructed, picking up speed. Ahead, another alarm blared, a fire alarm this time. A red light flashed sporadically, the blaring noise combining into a terrible cacophony. The lights dimmed momentarily, making everything feel like a twisted dream. "What is happening?" I murmured under my breath, panic rising like bile in my throat. "There!" Lily pointed to a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. I dashed toward it, hoping it led somewhere safe. I pushed it open, leading us into a small storage room. It was dark and cluttered, with shelves stacked high with supplies. My instincts screamed at me to hide, but I could feel the urgency in Lily's grip. "Do you have any other ideas?" I whispered. She shook her head, her eyes wide as she scanned the room. I could see beads of sweat on her brow.
and for a moment I hesitated. We had no concrete plan, just a hunt for refuge. But then I heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing closer. "Quick, behind there," I said, pointing to a stack of boxes near the back wall. We dropped down low and pressed ourselves against the cold concrete floor. My breath was shallow, a mix of exertion and fear. As we huddled together, the weight of the moment crashed down on me. "Are they coming?" Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. I strained to listen, all other sounds fading as I focused on the door. Finally, I saw movement. A shadow crept into the room, pausing just inside. The figure's silhouette was barely illuminated by the flickering light of the fire alarm. "They're here," I breathed. I clenched the scalpel tightly, fingers trembling. The figure began to pace slowly, as if savoring the moment, scanning the room. "I know you're in here," they teased, their voice low and menacing. "You can't hide forever." A chill ran through me, twisting my insides. They weren't just looking for me, they wanted to toy with us. I risked a glance at Lily. Her expression mirrored my fear, wide eyes and trembling lips. "Think, we need an escape," I whispered fervently. Just then, my eyes landed on a window high up in the room, half buried behind a stack of boxes. It was small, but it seemed like our only chance. "Lily, do you think you can climb?" She nodded, determination mingled with trepidation.
I pushed her forward, ready to provide support. As she scrambled towards the pile, I caught another glimpse of the figure, darting at shadows, their eyes now searching us out with an unsettling hunger. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered off completely, and the only source of illumination came from the sporadic fire alarm. My heart raced. I could hear my breath echo in the silence, along with Lily's frantic shuffling. "Lily!" I called, an edge of panic coloring my voice. I couldn't see her. Any second now, I'd hear footsteps again, and I felt the walls closing in. And that's when I realized someone else was in the room with us. The darkness swallowed me, a thick, suffocating void that clung to my skin. I strained my ears, heart thudding mercilessly as I tried to orient myself, but panic clawed at my throat. Was it the figure? Had they found us? "Lily," I whispered again, dread washing over me. "Can you hear me?" "I'm here." Her voice was a soft tremor somewhere in the shadows, and it steadied me slightly. I felt her presence, but the uncertainty of our situation began to close in like a vice. The sound of footsteps resumed, slow and deliberate, echoing ominously around us. My hands tightened around the scalpel, the familiar cold chill against my palm anchoring me. Whoever was out there was playing a twisted game, one I couldn't afford to lose. "What do we do?" Lily moaned, her voice tinged with desperation. I brought my finger to my lips, signaling for silence. We couldn't give away our position or our fear. Slowly, they crept closer, shadows dancing along the walls as they moved with eerie confidence. "You can't hide in the dark forever," the figure taunted, its voice ringing out ominously, echoing through the cramped space. My pulse quickened. I needed to buy us some time. With clenched teeth, I whispered to Lily, "Get to the window, climb up to it, I'll distract them." "Are you crazy?" she protested. "What if they—" "Just do it," I hissed. A swirl of adrenaline drowned every ounce of self-preservation in my being. I knew it was reckless, but it was our only option. As she reluctantly began to scramble towards the boxes, I steeled myself. "Hey!" I shouted, standing my ground. The figure halted, verging on the entrance. "What's this?" they cackled, their tone dripping with malice. "Leave her alone!" I shouted back, my voice filled with a reckless bravado that screamed desperation. Before they could respond, I lunged toward them with the scalpel raised, intent on diverting their attention. But they flickered into the shadows like smoke, effortlessly dodging me. The darkness swirled as I spun around, empty air where they had stood just moments before. The alarm continued its frantic blare, creating a chaotic symphony that reverberated against the walls. My heart thundered in my chest as I realized I had lost track of Lily. "No!" I shouted, turning just in time to see her climb onto the pile of boxes. "Lily, hurry!" I pleaded, hoping against hope that she could reach the window. She made it onto the highest box, barely inches away from escape, yet still not moving. The figure re-emerged, suddenly lunging at me just as I lost sight of Lily completely. I screamed as they closed the distance, but I was driven by an instinctive need to protect. I swung the scalpel wildly, a futile maneuver, but I felt the steel connect with something. A savage snarl erupted from their lips, and they staggered back, more surprised than hurt. The room spun around me, a storm of darkness and uncertainty. In that moment of chaos, I caught a glimpse of Lily's form at the window, desperately grasping at the frame. "Go, now!" I yelled through the ringing in my ears. "Get out of here!" "Jason!" she cried, one last desperate look capturing the anguish in her eyes. But the figure regained its composure, lunging forward again. I swung the scalpel, narrowly missing, as they slipped into the shadows, making me feel acutely aware of how outmatched I was. "Don't worry, I'll take care of her," they hissed, the words sending icy dread coursing through me. With that, the last vestiges of reason abandoned me. I couldn't let them take her. Fueled by determination, I surged forward, my instincts driving me past fear. I smashed hard against the weight of the door, stumbling into the corridor, determined to buy time for Lily. There she was, clambering through the window, the sheer act a testament to courage amidst terror. I felt a flicker of pride in that heartbeat, but the figure lunged out after me, arms outstretched, darkness coursing through them like a cloak. In a daze, I turned and ducked into the next room as they crashed against the wall behind me. "Lily!" I yelled, desperation clawing at my throat. But then silence met me, a chilling absence that echoed louder than a scream. I looked both ways, my thoughts racing. Had she made it? I darted out of the room, hoping against hope to find her, but uncertainty settled over me like a weight. "Jason," that twisted voice called out, laced with amusement, "you're too late. The darkness will claim what it desires." I stumbled forward, terror creeping back in. In the chaos of the hall, I could hear the alarms blaring still, the world outside oblivious to the dark presence shifting in the air. In my gut, I felt something had changed, not just around me, but deep within me. I had faced the darkness of the hospital and found my way back, but what shadows lurked just beyond the light? I took off in the direction I thought might lead to safety, uncertain if I was running towards salvation or deeper into the abyss. All that remained was a desperate hope that Lily had escaped and would find her way home, even if I couldn't.
The echoes of the past whispered through the building, reminding me that some secrets run deeper than the surface, waiting patiently for someone to find them. I moved forward, uncertainty lingering heavily in the air, leaving me to wonder, was I still being watched, or had I unwittingly become part of a story that would haunt me forever?